failed to make sure that the background checks now required under the law are done before guns are sold.
The law provides broad immunity against civil lawsuits unique to the gun industry.
You may think that Congress does nothing about guns, and the fact is, Congress has failed.
We all want to keep children safe in school, but this bill wouldn't do that. This bill is just another Democrat attack on the Second Amendment.
Many Parkland families strongly believe that gun companies must also be held responsible for the dangerous marketing of assault weapons.
And I was inspired to introduce the repeal of PLCA because the Newtown families went to court.
Supreme Court review sought. In a legal twist that's caught the attention of many, the case of KCI versus 8th Judicial District Court of Nevada is now gunning for its moment in the Supreme Court spotlight. At its core, this lawsuit is a contentious battle over whether firearm mags should be protected under the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act or the PLCAA, and whether the manufacturers can be held liable for criminal actions involving their products. The story begins with KCI, a company specializing in the manufacturing of mags for semi-auto firearms, including the ever-controversial AR-15s. What's put them in hot water is the fact that one of their mags was used in a criminal act back in August of 2019. The shooter didn't purchase the mag directly. They got it from someone else who had bought it. In response to the tragedy, the victims' family decided to point fingers at KCI, filing a lawsuit alleging negligence in the mag's production. This case isn't just a one-off. It has the potential to set a precedent in how we view mag manufacturers' liability for third-party criminal conduct. What's particularly fascinating here is the application of the PLCAA, a law designed to shield firearm manufacturers and dealers from being held accountable when their products are used for criminal activities. The central question before the Supreme Court is whether mags should fall under the category of component parts of a firearm and thus be entitled to PLCAA protection. The stakes are high, as the Supreme Court's decision could have a lasting impact on the landscape of the Second Amendment. If mags are deemed non-essential components and thus not protected by the PLCAA, it could open the floodgates for more lawsuits targeting firearm manufacturers and dealers. On the flip side, if the Supreme Court rules in favor of KCI, it would reaffirm the protection of manufacturers from third-party criminal conduct, which has been a contentious issue. This case not only brings to the forefront the legal intricacies of gun laws, but also delves into the broader conversation about the balance between individual rights and societal safety. It's a reminder that even seemingly obscure legal battles can have a profound impact on our society, and it's why the Supreme Court's decision here is so eagerly anticipated.
We all want to keep children safe in school, but this bill wouldn't do that. This bill is just another Democrat attack on the Second Amendment.
Many Parkland families strongly believe that gun companies must also be held responsible for the dangerous marketing of assault weapons.
PLCAA's impact. Alright, now let's dive into the nitty-gritty of the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, or PLCAA. This legal jargon might not be the dinner table conversation for most of us, but it's a crucial law when it comes to the world of firearms. The PLCAA is a U.S. law that was enacted to address a very specific issue: protecting firearm manufacturers and dealers from legal liability when their products are used in the commission of crimes. In simpler terms, it's all about shielding those who make and sell firearms from being held responsible when someone misuses their products for illegal activities. Now, why was the PLCAA brought into existence in the first place? It all boils down to the contentious debate surrounding gun control and gun violence in the United States. While the PLCAA might sound like it's giving firearm manufacturers a free pass, the idea behind it is to prevent what many see as an abuse of the legal system. In other words, it's trying to avoid a situation where someone commits a crime with a firearm and then, like a domino effect, the blame gets pushed onto the gun manufacturer. However, this law hasn't been without its share of controversy. There's been a raging debate about whether the PLCAA provides an excessive shield for firearm manufacturers, potentially letting them off the hook too easily. This debate has gained traction in recent years as concerns over gun violence and the responsibilities of those who provide the tools have come to the forefront of public discourse. So when you hear about the PLCAA, remember that it's not just a piece of legislation with a straightforward impact. It's the heart of a heated debate about individual rights, public safety, and the role of government in regulating the firearms industry. And it's that very debate that's made the PLCAA a hot topic in legal and political circles, adding yet another layer of complexity to an already contentious issue.
And the toll is staggering. Not just the 30,000 deaths every year, but 4 times as many injuries.
Democrats never once reached out to us to seek our input on the legislation we are considering here today.
KSI and the lawsuit. Let's take a closer look at the legal battle of this legal tussle involving KCI, a company in the business of manufacturing mags for semi-auto firearms. First off, KCI is no small player in this industry. They've established themselves as a key manufacturer of various firearm components, including mags, primarily used in semi-auto firearms like the controversial AR-15s. These mags are essential parts of these firearms, enabling rapid firing. The story takes a grim turn when on August 4th of 2019, one of KCI's mags became embroiled in a criminal act. An individual, driven by malicious intent, used one of KCI's mags to carry out a shooting. It's crucial to note, however, that this individual didn't directly purchase the mag. They obtained it through a second party who had acquired it legally. This scenario sets the stage for a legal battle that raises questions about the responsibility of manufacturers for third-party criminal acts. In response to the tragedy, the families of the shooting victims decided to take KCI to court. They've alleged that KCI was negligent in manufacturing the mags that were used in the crime. This means they're essentially arguing that KCI played a role in making it possible for the shooter to carry out the act, and they're demanding accountability. This lawsuit isn't just about the victim seeking compensation. It delves into a broader debate about where the line should be drawn when it comes to holding firearm manufacturers responsible for the consequences of their products. The lawsuit poses the fundamental question of whether manufacturers like KCI should bear any liability when their products are used in crimes, even if they were legally sold to a third party.
Fortunately, the Department of Justice has a long history of intervening in civil cases filed by gun violence survivors to defend this law.
Mr. Deutsch asked you about gun manufacturer liability, and I wanted to follow up and ask, does the recent Pennsylvania decision...
Key legal question. Now let's zero in on the pivotal legal question at the heart of the KCI case. Is a mag a component part of a firearm under the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act? To understand this, we need to dissect what it means for something to be a component part in the eyes of the law. The PLCAA defines a qualified product as any firearm, including antique firearms, a component part of a firearm or ammunition, and anything that has been shipped in interstate commerce. The term component part is the crux here, and it's this term that's up for debate. The central legal question is whether a mag fits the bill as a component part of a firearm, and therefore whether it should be entitled to the legal protections provided by the PLCAA. This isn't just a matter of semantics, it has real-world consequences, because if a mag is considered a component part, it's protected from certain liability claims. The crux of the issue boils down to whether mags are integral components of a firearm. The lower court, in their reasoning, have cast doubt on this. Their argument is twofold. First, they claim that the firearm in question could still fire a single shot even without a mag. In other words, mags might not be deemed essential for the basic function of a firearm. Second, the courts also point out that the mags used in the case weren't purchased with that specific rifle, suggesting that they're not inherently linked to the firearm. This brings us to the heart of the debate. What defines a component part? While a mag is undoubtedly a crucial accessory for firearms, is it as fundamental as, say, a stock or a barrel? The interpretation of this term in the PLCAA can significantly impact the legal landscape for manufacturers, as it could determine whether they could be held liable when their products are used in crimes.
On August 4, 2019, an individual criminally misused one of the KCI magazines to essentially perpetrate an unlawful shooting.
And I was inspired to introduce the repeal of PLCA because the Newtown families went to court.
The argument for Supreme Court intervention in the case. Now let's explore why KCI is making a strong case for Supreme Court intervention in their legal battle and why it's generating so much attention. KCI's argument is crystal clear. They firmly believe that MAGs should be protected by the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act (PLCAA). This belief centers on the idea that MAGs are indeed component parts of firearms. By presenting this case to the Supreme Court, KCI is essentially asserting that MAGs should enjoy the legal protections that the PLCAA offers to firearm manufacturers and dealers. To bolster their argument, KCI points to prior legal precedent. Specifically, they reference cases related to bump stocks and stocks, which have been deemed components under the PLCAA. In one case, it was ruled that a bump stock was a component part of a firearm, which is a significant reference point for KCI. They argue that if bump stocks, which are not nearly as integral to a firearm's basic operation as MAG, can be considered components, then MAG certainly should be. But KCI's argument goes beyond legal precedent. They also involve the intent of Congress in enacting the PLCAA. They contend that Congress designed this law with the explicit purpose of shielding firearm manufacturers and dealers from liability when their products are misused by third parties for criminal activities. By allowing lawsuits like the one brought against KCA to move forward, KCI argues that the fundamental purpose of the PLCAA is being circumvented. In essence, KCI is making a compelling case that MAGs are in fact components of firearms and should be granted the same legal protections as other parts under the PLCAA. They're drawing upon legal precedent and the original intent of the law to support their claim.
Failed to make sure that the background checks now required under the law are done before guns are sold.
The law provides broad immunity against civil lawsuits unique to the gun industry.
You may think that Congress does nothing about guns, and the fact is, Congress has failed.
And that's all we have for you in this video. See you next time, and bye for now.